Hi, everyone. Welcome back to She Blurs podcast. Today I have Terry Shepard as my guest. So, Terry, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Brooke, it is great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun listening to your canon of shows. Boy, do you have some fascinating guests. I hope I can live up to it.
I have a lot of people.
Well, they're so much fun, and I will definitely be sharing the She Burbs podcast on all of my social media stuff because it was a new discovery for me. I'm so glad I found you. For a guy like me who is a storyteller, it's just fascinating to hear stories like this. These days, I write books in two genres. My detective, Jessica Ramirez, had her debut last year in a story called Chasing Vega. She's back in June of 2021 with Chasing the Captain. I surround her with a diverse cast. Her partner is a computer forensics genius who happens to be LGBTQ. The medical examiner of the story is on the autism spectrum, and the director of the Phoenix FBI office in Vega is African American.
Wow.
In more than 5 decades as a corporate guy, I always had a passion for creating teams that were representative of the customers we served. So when I decided to write thrillers, I wanted the stars in my stories to be heroes that people who looked and lived in those bodies could identify with. It was also an opportunity for me to walk side by side with cops and computer nerds and doctors to try and better understand how they interact in their world. And that's how it all began.
Wow. That's amazing. Wow. I don't even know what to say, but that's amazing.
You know, maybe this happens to you. I mean, life, what was John Lennon's thing? Life is what happens to us when we make other plans. I never, ever dreamt that I would be writing fiction. I always thought that I was going to be a corporate guy. And when we moved back to Florida, we live in Jacksonville, Florida, and I didn't need to work anymore. I was kind of feeling like my life was over. I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And I decided to try and write fiction. And Jessica stuff was the first attempt that I had. It was great fun writing the story. What I didn't expect was the pandemic. And that's how I got into children's stories. I have a book out that I wrote with my wife called Juliet and the Mystery Bug. It stars our 4-year-old granddaughter. And it basically teaches CDC protocols on masking and hand washing, social distancing, and does it in the same way. I love, I was a big Dr. Seuss fan when I was a kid. I still remember, I do not like green eggs and ham. You remember that stuff. So I was thinking, why don't I write it like he would write it? And then had my son-in-law, who is a graphic artist, do the illustrations. And it's Juliet's discovery of how to do all of these things to stay safe. So here's a guy who started out thinking he's going to write thrillers about awesome Latina detectives, who also ended up writing about how to protect yourself during pandemic for children. So who knows where it'll go next?
Wow. What does your family think about your writing and your children's book?
They've been incredibly supportive. I talked to my wife. We tried to figure out what I was going to do because I really didn't need to do anything. I had been very richly blessed in my corporate career to be at a point in my life where I could do just about anything I wanted to. And I wanted to try and continue to follow what I thought was my life's purpose, which was to help as many people as I could achieve their potential. And that's what I loved when I was in the corporate world. I love doing that, finding folks that were, especially disenfranchised people, the folks that everybody else would say can't do this for whatever reason. I found that some of the smartest guys in my technical team way back when, before we really knew what autism was about, were guys on the spectrum or people that had Asperger's, that had trouble communicating in our earthly kind of socially expected language. But inside that mind was the same brilliance and oftentimes a real big heart. And so I wanted to continue to do that when I wasn't in the corporate world anymore, and writing those kind of characters turned out to be the way.
That's amazing. That reminds me of the TV show, A Good Doctor. The guy, the main character is on the spectrum and he's a doctor.
Yes.
I was wow.
And that's been the fun part, Brooke, because you know, imagine the research that you do for something like this. I mean, here I am. I mean, what does a white guy know about any of these people's experience? Well, when you research books, especially thrillers, you need to immerse yourself in the lives of the characters you're creating. So I got to know, you know, the woman on whom Jessica is based is a very good friend of mine who was a cop, a Latina, for 25 years, and she was the first minority woman on her police force, and one of the first women, and had a very rough go of it. So a lot of her stories were part of what went into this. And then, of course, I have my best friend's son has Asperger's, and we didn't know what that was when he was growing up. We said he marched to his own drummer. And the guy was fantastic on instant messenger, right? We'd stay up late at night when he's in junior high, just talking. But when he would look, he had trouble looking at you, and he had trouble putting stuff into words. Mm-hmm. And so that became Joey Price, my medical examiner in Chasing Vega. And I get the most mail from fans about Joey. Whenever he has a scene, they love it because he's smart. He's so smart. And all these people around him are, you know, struggling with the fact that he just doesn't get riled about stuff, but he has all the answers. so learning more about the world and about the amazing richness, diversity that's out there, and actually putting those people into situations where they can be heroes has been a blast. That's been the best part about writing for me.
That's nice. I'm gonna have to check out the series. I am. Wow.
I'll send you the book. Yep. The second one is coming out June 1st. And Jessica actually has her own Twitter handle. So if you look for Jessica Ramirez, she's out there. She's been on Twitter even before the book came out. And for some reason, she has a huge fan base in the UK. People in Great Britain love her. And they wrote and said, well, send her over here. You know, they think she's real, even though I say she's not a real person. Everybody thinks she's real. She's had marriage proposals. When I go to conferences in England, they say, are you bringing Jess with you? And what they said was, will you please write a story that takes place in some of it takes place in London. So Chasing the Captain takes her to London in search of the one bad guy who got away in the first book. And that was a blast taking her over there, because I partnered her with somebody who worked for the Metropolitan Police Force in London, who is of mixed ancestry. Her dad's Scottish and her mother is a South African Zulu tribe member. So we this incredibly biracial, powerful woman from the Met, who's a detective inspector, working with Jessica, who's this Latina fish out of water, right? She's from Illinois, and she's chasing a guy in London. And it was just so much fun that the cultural dynamic, right? You think you're going to a country where we both speak English.
Yes.
It couldn't be more different. It's really crazy. So that was a blast. And my cop beta readers over there were just getting a total kick out of it, seeing, you know, imagining themselves in that role. That's the best part.
That's amazing. Like, I don't even know what to say. Like, my questions, I'm just like, wow, that's amazing. I'm definitely gonna have to check out this series. That's something along the lines of books I like reading. So I do have a question. Can you tell us, like, the listeners, a brief summary of the series, like
Sure.
the book 1 and book 2?
So the Chasing Vega, the first book, the bad girl in that one is my favorite kind of villain. It was somebody who's doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. And we meet her in the prologue, and what she does is she goes after guys who got away with crimes, capital crimes like murder, and she kills them. The way she does it is she drugs them and throws them into the Grand Canyon. So that's the first thing we see. And then we switch to Illinois, a small town I made up on the Mississippi River, where Jessica Ramirez has been sent to a meth lab bust by a guy that doesn't like her, one of her supervisors, hoping that she'll fail. And of course she does. The house blows up. She's suspended for 30 days. and basically goes out to visit her uncle in Flagstaff, who's the sheriff of Coconino County, which encompasses the Grand Canyon. And he's trying to figure out who this serial killer is. So she and her sidekick, who also manages to get herself on suspension, fly out to Arizona and end up in the middle of this amazing series of events that go beyond just serial killings. It's a techno thriller. And there's stuff that happens in New York City that's part of it. And it's a wild roller coaster ride with a ticking time bomb that they have to defuse basically before the end of the story. And she meets and falls in love with an FBI guy, and there's a computer nerd involved. And Vega is a very complex bad girl, my antagonist. And the way that ends up, it leaves there is one thread that's left untied, and that's Vega's boss, who is the captain. He's a Russian guy. And that opens the door for the second story in the series, the trilogy called Chasing the Captain, where she goes to London and ultimately to Russia to try and find the guy who was pulling Vegas strings.
Wow. That's nice. Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. So what's the hardest scene to write and why in your novels, in your series that you wrote?
Well, in Vega, the hardest scenes for me to write in Vega have been the love scenes, because my real life cop on whom Jessica is based says that, Jessica would never, ever fall in love. She's way, way too in control to let any man have any part of her. So the love scenes were tough for me to write, but they're hilarious because throughout them, Jessica and her boyfriend are arguing. Her boyfriend's an FBI agent, and they're just, if you can imagine all of this romantic heat going on, and these two people she's saying, I'm going to do this. And she's saying, no, you're not. And they're just arguing back and forth as they're swapping spit, It's just, but that was hard to do because that dynamic of the tension involved when you are feeling like your emotions are taking over and you're a cop and you're taught to compartmentalize your emotions, to be able to channel that into a scene that, readers will enjoy, but also is authentic enough so cops can look at it and say, yeah, that's kind of how I'd feel. That was the toughest part for me.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of Law and Order SVU, how
exactly.
Relationship. And I love that show. But yeah, it kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah. Well, that's that's part of your research is you consume a lot of stuff. But I realized that there is a lot of dramatic license that shows like SVU have to take because they got to get everything done in an hour. So I spent an awful lot of time talking to people in Coconino County, both at the Sheriff's Department and at the National Park Service, the Rangers group there. I have friends at the FBI. So understanding what it was like to be an African-American working your way into leadership was a fascinating conversation with half a dozen guys that I got to be friends with who've done just that. That was part of the fun, was actually researching and trying to put myself into these people's brains to understand what their experience is like.
Wow. How long was your research process? Like, how long did it take you to research all of this information?
It was probably for Vega, it took longer. It was about a 6-month research window for that, because as the story was coming together, things would happen in the plot that I didn't expect, and I would need to go back and figure out, how that could technically happen. Like there's a scene in New York City where there's the bad guys want to blow up some steam tunnels right under the downtown area in Manhattan in the financial district. I didn't know anything about explosives. And then there's Vega uses poison. So I'm talking to the guys at Mayo Clinic about, I'm calling and say, so if I wanted to not really just instantly kill somebody, but make it impossible for them to move their muscles, what kind of drug would I use for that? So anybody that looks at my search history on my browser is going to think that guy is really weird.
Yeah. They'll probably be like, he's probably planning to kill people. But wow, that's amazing. So I do have a question. What advice would you give to help others who want to pursue a writing career?
That's a great question, Brooke, and I'm glad you asked it because I was asking that less than 2 years ago. When I decided I wanted to become a writer, what I did was I picked my 4 favorite authors, and that was Dan Brown, James Patterson, Allison Leota, and Megan Abbott. Those are the 4 people that I loved the most at that point in time. And I wrote them emails. And I asked them that question. I said, look, I'm not a stalker. I'm not looking for a mentor relationship. All I'm doing is looking for advice. If you could say one thing to a guy who's in his 60s, starting to think about writing, what would it be? And to a person, they were so responsive and friendly and saying, look, I'll help you. What do you want to know? Ask me more questions. But the big thing they said was get over the fear, feel the fear and write anyway. Your first stuff you're going to want to bury in the backyard. Every author I've talked to says they've got at least 2 books that they buried, symbolically in the backyard. But to find the courage to actually start telling the story, and then to surround yourself with smart people who can help you learn the craft. So on my team, I have a bunch of different editors that I work with. I have a story consultant that helps me with plot stuff. My cover designers that I work with try and turn my story into a compelling picture that will make people want to pick the book up. And I always try and hire smarter than I am because I want to learn. So I find who the best person is out there and pay the freight to bring them into my circle. And that's helped a lot, right? When you have somebody that's not only really, really good, but is also a good teacher and is willing to work with you, you grow faster in that space. I think a lot of us will say, okay, I'll just read a book or, I'll go on Amazon and buy a how-to. How do I write my first novel? Well, why not find your hero? Why not find that person? If you're a Janet Ivanovich fan, or if you like Toni Morrison, gosh, I wish she was still around. I miss her. But I mean, if somebody like that, to reach out to them and say, how'd you do it? Take me through your life. I want to know how you got to where you are. And the reality is that all of us, no matter what we do, take a similar path, right? We have this idea of what our purpose is, and then we try and find a way to pursue it with passion, to connect it with something we really love. And passion and purpose, the money always follows the passion. If you're starting out looking for money, that's wrong. What you need to do is figure out why you were put here on this earth. What were you sent here to do? And then figure out a way to do it with love, right? And I think my purpose is to make the world a better place, one individual at a time. So if I'm going through the drive-through at McDonald's and telling that gal who's being the minimum wage that I really love how she did her fingernails or her voice, the way she talked on the intercom was so professional, those little things make you feel better. That's one end of the spectrum. The second end is when you recognize a way that you can add value in someone's life, not be afraid to try and do it. I think that's what our purpose is. And then how do you do it? That's where the passion connection is. Figure out what you really, really love and then immerse yourself in it. And before you know it, you've got a very happy life. You're making enough money so you can live, and you feel good going to sleep at night because you're doing the right thing.
Yes, I agree. Wow. That's one of the reasons why I started taking up podcasting and interviewing people, because I want the people that I interview to inspire listeners, to inspire people who are coming on here listening to my interviews. And my younger cousins, like, they made me cry. They was like, "Oh, we've been listening to your podcast and you're doing an amazing job." And I was like, "Really? I didn't even know they listened to it."
Well, and you've gotten so good too. It's been fun. I always go to the very first couple. I like to listen to the first couple in the list and then compare them to today. Yes. And you've gotten so good at figuring out the right questions to answer. You got a great routine. And I think the guests that you've brought on, for anybody that wants to listen to this series, how can they help but come away with a better understanding of the world and the amazing people in it? So you're doing the right thing. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I remember you have Jennifer Gordon on Authors on the Air. Yeah. And she's a really good friend of mine. And she was the second person I interviewed. My very first my very first one, she was a good friend, and then the second one was Jennifer, and I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. Like, she, she made it so easy for me and simple, and she was joking with me and everything, and I was like, I don't know what to say.
Well, Jennifer Gordon is truly extraordinary. If you dig into her life, the inventions that she's created for herself, the fact that she was a teacher, that she's a competitive ballroom dancer and shares those skills, and then had the courage to go into her passion, which is writing amazing horror stories.
Yes.
I mean, to be able to think about that, just the courage it takes to think that you'd even go into that space when there's so many, it's another male domain, right? So she's like a minority in that space, and she's so darn good that she's a competitor. So it's been so wonderful to watch her enjoy success and inspiring to me, because I figure if she can do it, if I work hard like she does, maybe it'll happen to me.
Yes. That's how I was able to get like so many like mainstream famous people. I guess they're not famous, but they're more mainstream people because I took the chance. I emailed them and messaged them and they were like, sure, like the daughter of the author of The Shack.
Yes. Yep. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had her on the show yesterday. Well, Friday. And I'm like, I took the chance and emailed her and she was like, sure, I'd love to be on the show. And I'm like, really? So yeah, she's definitely given me the inspiration to reach out to people.
Yeah,
So
you're doing a great thing. I mean, I hope this gets more people interested in Jessica's stories and sells some books. But for me, the real goal of that story, the way that we were going to promote it before pandemic, was that Tracy, who's the real Jessica, the real cop, she and I were going to go to, various cities that had large Latin populations and also organized female cop associations and try and inspire more young women to want to join law enforcement. That was the broader goal of Vega, and the Jessica character was for young girls to think that maybe they could be cops. And if we got one person to beyond where they are today, that would be a success for me.
wow. So are you all still going to think about it? They're thinking about lifting the restrictions. So it's still possible to do it. Like, are you all still going to do it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the interesting thing that's happened to Tracy since we started working on this project is, she had retired from her police force, but she's so good and so popular that people are coming after her for jobs. So I don't know by the time that we're ready to do the road show, whether or not I'll be able to take her with me. But one of the things that I have found is that in every city that I've done a Zoom thing in or something, wherever I've been talking about Vega, there is at least one female cop there who fits the mold, who's close enough that I could go there and I could get the local. So it's even better if it's somebody that's like you were talking about, Jen, she's your friend. I mean, what if it's somebody down the street that who's up on that stage talking about how they became a police officer? That would be even better. So I'd love to take Tracy with me if she can go. And I'm sure there'll be some places that we will go together. But even if she can't, I'm going to find somebody locally. I'll ride along with them. That's what I love to do. I love to ride along with them when they're on shift. And then we'll end up at the local Latino center and we'll be talking about chasing Vega and becoming a cop.
That's amazing. I want to thank you so much, Terry, for coming on my show today and allowing me to interview you about your series.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Brooke, thank you for inviting me. I hope we can do it again.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you so much. Bye.
See ya.
I want to thank you all so much for listening to this episode. To this interview with Terry Shepard. So I have linked his website below. It's Tinkering Below. So if you would like to purchase his books or see what he's up to now, and you can also view Authors on the Air podcast. He is one of the hosts on there. So I hope you all check out his work. He's very, very extremely talented and passionate about what he does. So check it out. I hope you all enjoy this interview, and I hope you all have a great day.